They thought I was gone forever. But the truth? I was just watching. Watching them steal my life, my love, my money, and smile like nothing ever happened. But when karma arrived, it didn't knock, it crashed right through their perfect little world. Before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Comment your country. And let's see how far karma can travel. My name is Liana. And 3 years ago, I was declared dead. A tragic plane crash, no survivors, nothing but broken metal and ocean waves. That's what the world believed. That's what my husband Ethan believed. Or at least, that's what he told everyone. But fate had other plans. I didn't die that day, I barely survived. When I woke up, my body was burned, my face wrapped in bandages, my memory clouded. A small village doctor told me I'd been found floating on the shore, clinging to a piece of wreckage. He said it was a miracle. But for me, it felt like punishment. For months, I didn't know who I was. Then one night, during a heavy storm, it all came rushing back. My name, my home, and the $12 million inheritance my father had left me just weeks before the crash. I cried until morning, realizing that fortune was probably already gone. When I finally returned to the city 2 years later, I looked up my name online. And what I found shattered me. My husband had declared me legally dead. He'd inherited everything. And remarried my best friend, Claire. When I saw the photos online, my hands began to shake. There they were, Ethan and Claire, smiling in the same house I once called home. My wedding photos had been replaced. Even the walls I decorated were painted over, as if I never existed. I scrolled further, my heart pounding. Every memory, every trace of me, gone. And there they stood, hand in hand, celebrating their new beginning. I wanted to scream. But all I could do was stare at the screen. And whisper, why? Claire had been my closest friend since college. We shared secrets, dreams, and tears. She knew how much Ethan meant to me. She knew about my father's fortune. And now, she had taken both. For a while, I thought of confronting them. But one look in the mirror changed everything. My face had scars, faint, but visible. My eyes looked different, colder. No one would recognize me. And for the first time, that felt like power. So I made a choice. I wouldn't tell them I was alive. Not yet. I would watch. I would wait. And when the time was right, I'd make them face what they'd done. I found a small apartment near the city, using a new name, Lena Gray. The first thing I did was visit my lawyer quietly. And that's when I learned something that nearly stopped my heart. The inheritance, my father's $12 million, wasn't fully transferred to Ethan. A clause in my father's will said if I were ever found alive, every penny, every asset, would automatically return to me. Ethan knew it too. He must have read it. And now I understood why he never looked for me after the crash. He didn't want me to return. Because if I did, everything he'd stolen would vanish. So I smiled to myself. For the first time in 2 years, karma had just handed me a weapon. For the next few weeks, I learned to disappear. Every morning I'd walk past my old street. Coffee in hand, a hat low over my face. From the outside, I was just another stranger. But inside, I was standing in front of the life that used to be mine. Through the tall glass windows, I could see them. Ethan laughing, pouring wine. Claire arranging flowers on the same dining table I had chosen years ago. My heartbeat echoed louder than the traffic. They looked happy. But it was the kind of happiness built on stolen ground. One afternoon, I saw a moving truck parked outside. Curious, I followed from a distance. New art pieces, new furniture, all expensive. And I knew instantly whose money paid for it. My father's legacy. My bloodline. The empire he worked for his entire life. That night, I sat alone by my apartment window. The city lights flickered below. And I whispered, "You built your heaven on my ashes. Now, I'll make you live my hell." The next morning, I started my plan. I created a new identity, a background story, and applied for a position at a charity foundation. The same one Ethan chaired after inheriting my father's investments. They called me for an interview the next week. When I walked into that glass building, memories flooded back. The scent of Ethan's cologne, the marble floors, the framed awards with my father's name. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a calm smile. And then, he walked in. Ethan. He didn't recognize me. Not even a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He looked straight at me and said, "Welcome, Ms. Gray. I've heard good things about your work." I wanted to laugh. Good things. He was shaking hands with the ghost he buried. As I sat across from him, I studied every movement, the way he smiled. The faint guilt hiding behind his confidence. But guilt fades fast when greed runs deep. He asked about my experience. I kept my answers short, polite, distant. He liked that. By the end of the meeting, he said, "Congratulations, Ms. Gray. You're hired." And just like that, I stepped back into his world. Not as his wife, but as his silent reckoning. Working under Ethan felt surreal. Every day, I walked through the same halls where my old self used to smile. The same halls where my laughter once echoed. Now, it was silence that followed me. The foundation office was elegant, glass, gold, and fake smiles. Ethan moved through it like a king. But I could see something different in him now. A tension behind the charm. A small twitch when someone mentioned my name. Liana. Yes. My name still lived there. In the stories people told. In the framed photos hanging in the hallway. To them, I was a tragic memory, a saint who died too soon. And Ethan played the role of the grieving husband perfectly. Until one day, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Two board members were whispering in the conference room. They spoke about missing funds. Money that didn't match the reports. Millions. And Ethan's name was right in the middle of it. I hid behind the corner, heart pounding. So he wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. My inheritance had fed his luxury. But his thirst for more was eating him alive. That night, I began digging deeper. Every document, every transaction. I checked it all, quietly, carefully. And the more I found, the darker it became. Ethan had been transferring money into offshore accounts. Using fake charities under Claire's name. They were laundering what was left of my fortune. The same money that was still legally mine. I sat at my desk, trembling. They hadn't just moved on from me. They had buried me and used my ashes to build their empire. I couldn't cry anymore. The pain had turned into something sharper, colder. Not rage, but purpose. I began to leave small traces. A missing file here, a changed password there. A message sent from an unknown email that said only, "The dead never forget." At first, Ethan brushed it off as a prank. But when the second message arrived, with an old photo of us from our honeymoon, his confidence began to crack. And that's when I knew. Karma had just taken her first step. Each day after that, I watched Ethan unravel, piece by piece. The man who once walked with perfect confidence now looked over his shoulder every few minutes. He checked his phone constantly, flinched at sudden sounds. And every time he did, I smiled inside. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I wanted him to feel what I had felt. Confusion, fear, betrayal, loss. Not all at once. But slowly, like poison. Claire began visiting the office more often. She looked radiant from the outside. But her smile had a strange stiffness now. The kind that hides exhaustion. She greeted me politely, never realizing that the woman she was speaking to was the same one she had replaced. One afternoon, I slipped a small envelope onto Claire's desk. Inside was a photo, Ethan and I on our wedding day. But the faces were partially burned. No note, no signature, nothing. Just the scent of smoke and memory. The next morning, she looked pale. Her hands trembled as she spoke to Ethan behind closed doors. Their voices rose, anger, confusion, denial. And from my desk outside, I could hear every word. "Someone knows," she said. Ethan's tone was sharp. It's impossible. But doubt had already entered their perfect world. The cracks were showing. That evening, I walked home under the streetlights, thinking about how easily their guilt betrayed them. They had everything: money, luxury, each other. And yet, they couldn't sleep in peace. I didn't need to destroy them. All I had to do was remind them of what they'd done. Their own guilt would do the rest. A week later, I left another message. This time, a text sent to Ethan's personal phone. It said only 4 words. I never really died. 4 hours, he didn't respond. But the next day at work, he looked like he hadn't slept at all. Dark circles, shaking hands, fake smiles. He was cracking. And watching him crumble felt like breathing again. But revenge has a way of taking its own path. And I didn't realize then that my next move would wake something I couldn't control, that I didn't plan what came next. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the small, still burning ember of pain that wanted to see them fall further. But that night, I made a mistake. I called him. No number, no name, just a private call in the dark. He answered on the 3rd ring. Hello? His voice was tired, unsteady. I said nothing. Just silence. And in that silence, I could hear his breathing quicken. Who is this? He asked. Still, I stayed quiet. Then, just before hanging up, I whispered 3 words. Soft, calm, deliberate. You forgot me. The sound of his sharp breath before the call ended. It told me everything. He knew. He remembered. And now, he was terrified. The next morning, the office was in chaos. Ethan didn't show up. Claire left early, eyes red from crying. Rumors started spreading: arguments, paranoia, police reports. But I stayed quiet, my face calm, my tone steady. That afternoon, I found a small note slipped under my office door. No name. Just handwriting I could never forget. It read, "If this is you, please, stop. I'm sorry for everything. Please, just stop." My heart raced as I read those words. Not from guilt, but from the strange thrill of being seen. He knew it was me. He felt it. But he couldn't prove it. I folded the note carefully and kept it in my drawer. Then I looked at my reflection in a glass window beside me. The woman staring back wasn't the same fragile, broken soul anymore. She was calm. Cold. Unrecognizable. Days passed. Ethan started avoiding everyone. His once confident posture was gone. He jumped at sudden noises. Even Claire began keeping her distance. Their picture-perfect marriage was collapsing from the inside. Without me ever touching a thing. I told myself it was justice. That I deserved this peace. But at night, when the city went quiet, I'd sometimes hear my own heartbeat echo louder than it should. Maybe it wasn't peace. Maybe it was something else. A shadow that had learned to live inside me. Still, I wasn't done. Not yet. Because one final truth, the one he'd hidden even from me, was about to come out. And when it did, no one would walk away untouched. I always thought I knew the truth. That the accident was just an accident. A twist of fate. A cruel stroke of bad luck. But fate doesn't twist like this. Not unless someone's hands are on the wheel. It started with a message. An anonymous email that landed in my inbox one quiet morning. The subject line read, "You don't know what really happened." Inside, there was a single photo. My car. Crashed, mangled, and surrounded by investigators. Except one thing stood out. A man in the corner of the picture. Half turned away. Wearing a jacket I'd seen before. Ethan's jacket. At first, I refused to believe it. I told myself it was coincidence. It had to be. But the more I looked, the harder it became to deny. He was there. At the scene. Long before anyone said he'd arrived. My hands trembled as I zoomed in. And then I saw it. His face reflected faintly in the window of a police car. Not grief. Not shock. Just fear. Fear of being caught. My chest tightened. The walls felt like they were closing in. Had he done this? Had he tried to end me? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory replayed in my mind. His sudden concern after the crash. The guilt in his eyes when I woke in the hospital. The quick way he changed the subject whenever I mentioned that night. It all fit too perfectly. He hadn't just betrayed me. He tried to erase me. I decided I needed proof. Real proof. So, I went back. To the police archives, the hospital records, even the towing company that took my wrecked car away. And there it was. A report that never made it to my lawyer. Brake line failure. But not natural wear. Clean cut. Deliberate. Someone had tampered with my car. I remember standing in that dusty records room, holding the paper with shaking hands. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it echo off the metal walls. He wanted the money. He wanted freedom. He wanted me gone. But I wasn't gone. And now, I was coming for everything he tried to take. When I stepped out of that building, the sunset hit my face, warm, almost golden. And for the first time, I smiled. Not because I was free, but because I finally knew why I had survived. It wasn't an accident. It was destiny giving me one last chance to write the ending myself. And I was going to make sure Ethan's ending was one he'd never forget. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel anger anymore. Just silence. Cold, sharp silence. Because now I understood everything. The crash wasn't fate. It was planned. And Ethan, the man I once trusted with my life, had cut the brakes that almost took it. He thought I'd died. And when I didn't, he thought he could rewrite the story before I found the truth. But the thing about lies is, they rot slowly. And they always leave a trail. I started watching him, quietly, from a distance. I followed his new wife, Cassandra. A woman who looked like the version of me he thought he wanted. Perfect hair, perfect smile. And no idea she was living with a monster. From social media posts to charity galas, Ethan and Cassandra were the picture of success. Laughing, smiling. Posing with their new house. The one he bought with my inheritance. But money can't hide guilt. And every time I saw his eyes on camera, they looked hollow. Empty. Like he was already haunted. Still, I needed more. More than just satisfaction, I needed justice. So I went back to the man who had sent me that email. The one who knew the truth. His name was David Ross. A former mechanic who had inspected my car before the crash. When he saw me alive, he froze like he'd seen a ghost. I thought you were. I was supposed to be, I interrupted softly. Now tell me what really happened. He looked down, guilt heavy on his face. I was paid to stay quiet. Someone told me not to report the cut. They said it would ruin lives. Whose life? I asked. He didn't answer. But he didn't have to. That silence was louder than any confession. When I left his shop, I knew what I had to do. Expose Ethan. Not by yelling, not by threats, but by letting his world collapse, piece by piece. I started small. Anonymous messages to the people who trusted him. Photos, documents, whispers of secrets. A small spark in a house of lies. And soon, the smoke began to rise. Investors backed out of his company. Cassandra started asking questions. And Ethan? He began to panic. He called the police twice in 1 week. Claiming someone was stalking him. He wasn't wrong. He just didn't realize who it was. Because the ghost he buried was walking again. And this time, I was coming for his truth. And his peace. A week later, the first domino fell. Ethan's company, once a shining empire, suddenly faced a scandal. Anonymous leaks exposed financial manipulation, offshore accounts, and fake charity donations. Every article had evidence. And every piece of evidence came from me. I watched it all unfold quietly from my apartment. His interviews turned into interrogations. The proud CEO, the devoted husband, now just another liar caught in his own web. Cassandra stood beside him at first, holding his hand in court, defending him online. But truth has a way of whispering even when you try to silence it. One night, I saw her walking out of their mansion. Alone, crying, clutching her phone. She'd found something. And I already knew what it was. Because I'd sent it. It was a video. From years ago. Security footage showing Ethan in my garage. The night before the crash. Holding a wrench. Leaning under the hood of my car. And cutting the brake line. Cassandra didn't believe it at first. She confronted him. And in that heated moment, he said something that destroyed everything. "I did it for us," he shouted. Those 5 words. Recorded on her phone. Spread across every media outlet within hours. His career ended overnight. His investors pulled out. His house was surrounded by reporters. And Cassandra, she vanished, filing for divorce the next morning. And me? I sat in silence, staring at the reflection of my own face in the window. I thought revenge would feel powerful. But instead, it felt heavy. Empty. Because somewhere deep down, the part of me that once loved him still remembered the warmth before the betrayal. Before the greed. Before the crash. But then I'd see the scar on my shoulder. And I'd remember. He didn't just break my heart. He tried to erase me. So I kept going. I sent every last document to the authorities. I testified under a new name, hidden behind legal walls. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Ethan was sentenced to 25 years in prison. No cameras, no money, no fake smiles. Just silence, the same kind he left me in. But even then, the story wasn't over. Because when the truth finally dies, karma begins to live. And karma never forgets its way home. It had been 3 years since the trial. Life had finally quieted down. I changed my name, my city, my everything. But some nights, I'd still wake up, hearing the screech of the crash. Feeling the weight of betrayal crush my chest all over again. And then one morning, I got a letter. A single envelope. No return address, just my new name handwritten across it. Inside was a short note. "Please. One last time. I need to see you." It was signed, Ethan. At first, I wanted to burn it. He didn't deserve a second of my peace. But something in me, curiosity, closure, I don't know, made me drive to that prison on the outskirts of the city. When I walked into the visitor room, I almost didn't recognize him. The man sitting across the glass wasn't the same one who once smiled beside me. He looked smaller. Tired. Defeated. He lifted the phone slowly. "Liana," he whispered. And I almost forgot how my name sounded in his voice. "I'm sorry," he said, his eyes trembling. "I lost everything, the house, the company, Cassandra. Even myself. I just wanted to win. I didn't mean for you to." I cut him off. "You didn't mean for me to what, Ethan? Die?" Silence filled the room. I could see his hands shaking. For a moment, I wondered if he truly understood what he'd done. Then I realized, it didn't matter. Because forgiveness wasn't mine to give anymore. That belonged to the version of me he destroyed years ago. So I leaned closer to the glass and whispered. "You know, Ethan. I used to think I'd never escape you. But the truth is, you're the one trapped now. And I'm finally free." He tried to say something, maybe to beg, maybe to cry. But I hung up the phone. As I walked out of that prison, the cold air hit my face, and for the first time, it felt warm. Like the universe had finally taken a deep breath. I looked up at the sky and smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I'd survived. And survival, That's the most powerful revenge of all. If you're still watching this, comment "Karma never misses" to prove you made it to the end. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story. Because sometimes, the past can't be erased. But karma always finds its way.